All right. Hi, everyone. This is Faye from Feisworld Media. And I don't know where you're tuning in these days, wherever you are. If you have any questions, feel free to ask directly. You're not going to show up on screen. I always want to let people know. And I'm here with my new friend, Kevin Elster. Is that the right way to say your last name, Kevin?
I've been told it's German way back when, so I say Ulster, but I think if you went to Hamburg, Germany, it'd be a different case.
Elster. All right. So we'll talk about your origin stories in just
Sure.
a bit. I'm so glad you're joining me. And let me give people just a brief idea of who you are, but we're going to dive in much deeper into your origin stories, where you came from, what you've been doing before you joined Synthesia, and we'll just go from there.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, check it out. So, Kevin is head of Synthesia Academy. His mission is to help everyday people and enterprises close the gap between understanding information and putting it to work. I'll just comment on that real quick because Synthesia is one of my favorite AI tools with AI avatars, and we can definitely talk about that in just a second. I love this conversation. It's so relevant to me and my audience who have been following me pretty much on LinkedIn and YouTube. So, drop in your questions for sure. And I want to say that Kevin, with over a decade in education and leveraging emerging tech for video communication, he's crafted learning solutions for notable organizations like General Assembly, very familiar with that, here in Boston as well, the School of the New York Times, and Sotheby's Institute of Art. And for those of you who haven't checked out Synthesia, I've definitely listed some links and information like that below. Check it out. Synthesia, it is SYNTHESIA.io. And Synthesia's community link is also down below. And you can also connect with Kevin on LinkedIn. So, yeah, with that said, Kevin, let's dive right in. I definitely want to give people an idea of, who you are and what you do. Maybe in your own words, like these days, you living in Copenhagen as well. We're going to give that away. Like, what is it like being in your role? What is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think it's really about helping people to understand how to use video to communicate. I know that we're an AI video company, but and we have these avatars, I think, that capture people's attention. But when it comes down to it, a lot of it is how do we apply video, something that we're using more and more of as phones get more prevalent and as things as we consume more and more video. It's teaching people how to communicate with video. And I think what's interesting about now more than ever is that if we video is accessible to everyone, and so if you have all these AI tools, suddenly you can create content very easily. I think my role is to figure out how to help people figure out what is the message that they want to drive. How can you use something that is an emotional, engaging format like video instead of just text? Because everybody is communicating with text, but then we go home and we watch everything in video. And so we want to bring video into the enterprise, help people get their work done faster, give them access to more information. And so with Synthesia Academy, it's more the customer education, and it's everything from how does this fit into your learning and development workflow to how do you put together a basic video. So it's all things under the sun.
Yeah, I love it. Let's break it down because I realize you and I have been basically video creators probably for a little while now, and you have a very diverse background and even
Yeah.
richer than where I came from. I primarily worked in tech consulting, whereas you delved into art and tech and video storytelling. So when you help people get started, right, what are some of the conversations and questions that often come up? Because I may or may not be your direct target audience. I just wonder, like, who are some of the people who are engaging with you or specifically with Synthesia's Academy?
Yeah, so a lot of the folks who engage with us, because the AI videos really had this really nice niche in terms of helping to develop instructional and informational content. A lot of the folks who I talk with are in learning and development, and what they're a lot of them are not new to video. A lot of them use it already. Maybe they do screen recordings or they shot video live themselves, but it's trying to figure out what they need their human selves for in order to produce video versus what they can use these AI avatars for, and how they can build better learning experiences using the avatars. And that's using them maybe to greet learners when they first take a course, or maybe they're using them as a facilitator or in different roles during both online and in-person experiences. Because I think I've seen e-learning kind of the tools themselves have evolved, but the way that we teach and the way that we engage the person who's on the other side of the screen hasn't really changed from a classroom model. And so there's a lot of drive to either develop content faster, and I'm not saying that more content is better, but a lot of the teams that we work with, they're being measured on how quickly was this developed. How can we cut time here and there in order to produce more courses and resources, which again, isn't necessarily the solution to learning problems and how we engage people and drive new behaviors, but it's kind of the reality that they live in. And so really helping learning and development folks either to enhance their experience of these learning courses and resources that they come up with, or helping them to optimize their process. Because I think with AI video, that's what's new than before, is again lowering the amount of effort that it takes to make these videos, but raising the bar for what is the quality and the output of these MP4s and other embeds that folks are putting in their courses.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I feel like I'm still new to it, even after writing and learning about AI in general, and then AI videos through Synthesia since late 2022. And you think about these things, right? It's like it takes time for people to absorb, and then like who do they look to learn about these things? And it's also feels a little risky, nerve-wracking when you're changing the way that you used to do things, even if it means that you didn't produce that many videos due to cost and labor and just not having the right talent on your team to
Yeah.
produce them. So I think Synthesia AI is fascinating to me. I've done a number of videos on my YouTube channel, as you know, Kevin, and
Yeah.
I have basically, for those of you who don't know, I can use my webcam, which is not the highest. I mean, I have a 4K Logitech, but it's still a webcam that I'm using live streaming right now. I can record basically me talking for a few minutes, and I can also use one of my fancier cameras, and then
Wow.
record, kind of more full body or like above my waist kind of talking head videos. And then Synthesia is able to interpret and basically manipulate the videos and give me an avatar that looks just like me. And so I just kind of give people a sense of what it means. But like Kevin, I'm curious in terms of when you work with companies, what are some of the limiting factors? Like maybe some of that is their mindset, or some of that, to me, I realize a lot of companies are trying to use AI for absolutely everything. It's like this,
Yes.
it's like this magical bullet, and it's not really. So where's that balance, and how do you educate people on that?
It's such a good question. I think one of the first places to start in this process is you have a lot of folks who are and myself included in previous roles that I've had, where your reality as somebody who designs learning experiences and learning content is where do these requests for these experiences come from? They come from a training request that comes in where someone who frankly doesn't know much about learning comes in and says, hey, I need a course or I need a video on this to teach this audience this information, and with the intent that is going to drive some sort of that's going to drive some sort of change. And I think the part that I struggle with is, again, it's how do we get folks to either understand what learning content will drive new behaviors versus how can we engage people in different ways? Meaning, what am I trying to say? It's this idea that if you take this one course, you're suddenly going to learn something new overnight. And I'm sure if I know that you have not just learned but mastered many different skills. And remind me, I think you've been the captain. You were the captain of a hockey team, and all these all these other skills that you've learned. But you certainly, they didn't just hand you a hockey stick and say, okay, here's a course on how to use this hockey stick, and then suddenly you became captain of the hockey team. It takes, it's an extension of these experiences. It takes repetition, it takes spaced practice, it takes multiple events for you to actually begin to learn and master a skill. So there's that exists in the world. I think also this idea of when we talk about balancing or balancing the use of AI video versus other techniques and tools that we have, I often urge folks to take a step back and say, what are you doing currently? And it's this idea that maybe what are we trying to measure? What are we trying to change? And how's AI video going to help that? And so one of the biggest barriers to overcome is, how do we measure what's important for your team to say this was successful? Is it development times? Is it how you're engaging? Are you looking for particular measuring behaviors that come off the back of your courses? And that's the first place that I always start is, how long does it, do you know how long it takes you to develop a course or how much effort it takes? And so it's about measuring things that are important for your team so that we can then start to unpack and unbundle projects and say, where might AI video fit? And maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but now I'm on a roll. But what I like to lead folks through, or when we do workshops, is to have folks take a step back and reflect on their process. Take the last 3 projects and take all the tasks that it took to deliver on those projects. And it helps if they were successful, so you can start to build on that success. But to start to measure, look at the different tasks and say, what did I need to do at this point in the design process? How can I, or maybe it was, I need to engage learners so that they're excited and motivated to take these courses. Well, once you lay out all those tasks, you start to plug in and say, okay, maybe an AI video would fit here, or I could use another tool here. But it's starting to break this kind of cloud of development into all of its component pieces to look and see, where can I actually make a change? Because I think the experiments are great, but it really helps to be a little bit more precise about what you're doing differently next time so that you can improve your practice.
I love where we're going with this because truthfully, I'm unable to really talk about AI practices with a large number of people. And, in this case, like, oh, I love this question. Charlie, hold on for just one moment. We're going to finish my thought here and we're going to go to your questions. So, Kevin, for me, really, I realized that number one, a lot of people are not really capturing the steps or important elements relevant for their process, whether it's video storytelling or creating an online courses that involve videos or otherwise. Then it's really hard to understand how to measure it, right? Like I know as a creative entrepreneur, sometimes we're so busy day in and day out, like we just don't really even look at the processes. Once we do, a lot of people don't realize that you do have to visit them on a pretty much a quarterly basis, right? Like a few times a year, they do change. And to your point, like for example, my dear producer who has been with me for the past 6-7 years is going on extended vacation right now. So yes, I can edit videos and really like it too. A lot of people don't, but I do. However, without his support, I'm just not going to have that much time, right? It's a real constraint for me. Do I then tell myself, well, this is a period of time where I don't create videos or I don't want to create video courses? This is precisely where I want to turn to a tool such as Synthesia. I can enter a script, right? I can pre-plan, I can brainstorm directly with Synthesia's AI built in. I may have some ideas and help me write the script. I may not use the script directly. I will then apply my own thinking and revisions. Then with one button push, my video is done. So, again, is it better? Do I hate being in front of the camera? I don't. Do I hate editing videos? I don't. But
Yeah.
right, there's a tool out there that's it's helping me accomplish something that's going to otherwise take me 10x the time.
I know we're going to get to Charlie's question in just a second, but I just want to respond to something you said quickly. It's this, I think that with AI video, there's this hope in this dream. And there was a lot of excitement back in 2023 where it's like, hey, this is actually going to change the way that we teach. Suddenly we'll have interactive learning chatbots or, using generative AI, we'll be able to use large language models to build entire learning journeys or experiences. But I think in 2024, it's cooled down a little bit, and people are the hype is still there. Maybe it's shifted and looked a little bit different, but people are much more realistic now. And I think it's important to say, okay, what is different about this time than times before? Again, it's about lowering the threshold of what it takes to make a quality video. And if suddenly the bar is lowered and you don't have to shoot video anymore, you don't have to edit as much,
Mhm.
then what can you do with that time? And if you're kind
Yeah.
of stuck, if your reality is that you're stuck in the content factor and you have to make content faster,
Mhm.
then look at ways to optimize your workflow. But for a lot of folks who maybe are not under that time constraint and trying to produce things quickly, if you
Mhm.
have this extra time and video is easier to create, then what can you do differently? How can you make experiences better? And I think that ties really nicely into where Charlie wants to go. So let's
Yeah.
definitely pick up that question.
Let's do it. All right, let's see it. Charlie Fuller, thank you so much for your question. Great root cause discussion. I'm curious how these tools can help even deeper in the root structure to encourage interest in learning and curiosity and motivation. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah. So Faye, I'm so excited that Charlie asked this question. So one of the problems that without, sorry, Charlie just wrote in, without the motivation, it seems we can't drive any change. I love this because one of the biggest issues that I see is this idea with learning courses and resources is this idea of where the process starts for engaging learners. Often, what we see is that if I were working in a mid-sized company with a learning management system, how would I know that there is something that's helpful for me? Well, or that I have to do even worse, that I just have to take something that's been mandated for me. And there's things we can avoid, like compliance training or onboarding. But by and large, if somebody gets a training, it appears in their inbox or as a notification that says, "Hey, you have to take this course." I
Mhm.
really think of that the experience starts when you starts long before. Maybe you send out. It's about using marketing concepts to
Mhm.
engage people up front. And I'm not saying that you should sell your courses internally, but I think it helps drive that urgency. If you think about your learning courses and resources like products, you want to
Mhm.
tell people about it. You want to explain to them why it might be useful, or you want to catch them when they need it most, so that they're motivated to learn, or they're motivated to take the set aside time
Mhm.
before they dive into the learning experience that you've set out. I often compare it to coming to a party where you kind of walk in the door and you don't really know anybody and you're not sure what to do, and then somebody just says, "Hey, come on in, the party's just getting started." And right now the music's quiet, the lights are off, maybe you
Mhm.
see some people gathered, but there's nothing happening. Whereas the a really good party, if you've I grew up in the suburbs, and in high school, if I shouldn't say this, but if parents were away, somebody would be having a party, you'd be walking up to the driveway, or like you'd be driving through the neighborhood trying to figure out where this is, and then you'd hear the lights, you'd hear the thump of the music, you'd see the lights, and then you'd open the door and you're greeted with this loud music. It's it you're motivated to go in and stay and be curious, and then also see who else is there. And I think that's a huge part of what I use AI avatars for, is creating teasers and explainers for my learning content, so that folks can get motivated
Mhm.
to engage in the experience, rather than just sitting there and seeing the first video and saying, "Oh, this is going to be a lesson about sales enablement," and it's just not that exciting. And then we wonder why folks say, "Hey, I don't have time
Mhm.
time to learn."
Yeah, it's it's so interesting, and I love all the sharing and relating to our own experiences. And thank you, Krista, for adding your comment as well. Original degrees in advertising before I moved to education. These skills really help immensely, and I know that Kevin, you also came from an education background. Kind of want to delve into that a little bit too, but
For sure.
I think what's interesting as I come from, I came from a pretty, I consider traditional, like a consulting, tech consulting background. And I think I look back to being trying to innovate within the workplace, and people often comment is like, "Faye, that's risky." Like people are very, often very risk averse. And where I was thinking about these days, if I were to be inserting myself back into the corporate world, I can imagine taking the chance, the risk of trying something new, including AI videos.
Mm,
And I think two things that come to mind, and maybe these are more questions than answers, which is one, that if something has never been done before and you're initiating it, and
mm,
sometimes people say, what if you fail? And I guess that is, I think there's a false expectation of trying something new with a very positive intention. And if something doesn't work out, what exactly does that mean, right? If you create a video, a learning tutorial that you set aside a couple of weeks and, learning how to use AI and creating a script in a short period of time, you create a 5 lesson module and then 10 employees out of your company watched it. Maybe half of them liked it, half of them prefer that you personally to be on screen. Is that a failure? I wonder. Right? Like it's so subjective. So your video has been seen, I don't know, 2 hours. Is that a failure? There's no real measurement. And yet people are really fearful to try something. I don't think that just applies to work. It applies to everyday life. Trying a new recipe,
Yes.
trying a new pen. Does it work as well as it did before? I know
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of a dilemma, and I think there's a human dynamic going on that we can really get into a bit here.
Yeah, yeah, and to your point, I mean, we're still very early in this phase of AI video and the types of experiments that you could run. I think, I mean, my where I always suggest folks who to get started is start with something small, and if you're at a company where personal brand is important, or you're worried about your work being seen, it's start small and start private. So I think it takes rather than to take your example, instead of creating 5 lesson modules, maybe it's just a video message versus you want to test a text announcement versus a video announcement. And maybe your hypothesis is that with a video announcement, there will be more people that engage with a text announcement. And you choose 3 people who receive, you can do a larger test and just send both and see what people say. Or you can test 3 people. It's a small sample size. But again, if you want to maybe succeed or fail in private before you go big, start with that, where it's 3 people who get the video message versus 3 people who get the text message, and then ask them for their feedback. But I think to your original point, it's this idea of where do I start? And I see this all the time with folks who are creating Synthesia videos where maybe they're used to presenting on camera and they're used to presenting from slides, and they want to translate this entire 40-minute presentation into a series of 8 5-minute videos, and to me, that's actually really complex and difficult and takes a lot of effort for maybe not that great a payoff. But let's say you're to create just a primer video that says, hey, here's what you'll get out of this webinar recording before you commit to watching all 40 minutes. Here are three concepts or 3 things or 3 timestamps that you can use to help you navigate this 40-minute recording, and just tell people, hey, this is a short video that's just going to tell you how to use this resource. Again, you're not spending hours creating 8 5-minute long videos, but you can start small with just a single video and test and see. It helps to know what you're measuring for or what you want to test. But I always say start small, and if it's a big thing for you, then start private. Start small, but again, you want to have people to test and get this feedback from. To your point as well.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? We're trying to humanize this process here. It's not to say that AI is doing everything, is going to do everything perfectly, but start small, and there's nothing wrong with doing just that. And I want to, showcase Krista's comment here: marketing skills, crossover with storytelling skills, with education, telling a relatable stories that connects people to the content, emphasize memorable and oftentimes shareable. I think the storytelling piece is something that I feel like we've neglected over the years. We haven't really been taught to storytell the right way. I'm not suggesting there is a wrong way, but sometimes I realize that in a corporate setting, right, you get these modules and courses or an email suggesting that this is something you should do, but there's no really step-by-step process where there's no training, there's no practice within the corporate
Yes.
environment for you to do that. I love, Kevin, even during our first conversation, I remember I was in such a rush in Beijing and cleaning out my house and everything. And immediately, I found our conversation to be very engaging. I think we talked for nearly an hour. I appeared on your podcast. It was such a smooth and easy conversation. Even before we hit, recording and live streaming today, you ask about where I'm from, you picked all these little things. So
Well, to your
that's a
point, just
skill.
to shout out something from there is when we first connected, you had this incredible, huge wall site. Well, I can't remember if this you showed it to me or if it was actually in the room you were in.
Yeah, it's different now because that one is being exhibited
This is what I'm
somewhere, but
talking about.
this
That
is like a replacement, but these are also done on silk. Yes, continue.
exactly. And so you have all these, already if I'm trying to figure out a little bit about who you are, I can be nosy and peek around your room and I
Mhm.
can see you had this incredible wall-sized fine art on the wall. And so that seemed like a natural starting place. But yeah, you got interesting, even just on your floor, it looks like you have some stuff that's going to go up right away. So I'm just impressed by even just what I see in the background.
About noticing, right? Maybe noticing is a skill because I think we very quickly learned in this lifetime to stop noticing things. And it's a I realized that as someone who always loved telling stories growing up as an only
Mm,
child, I would have my little like story time after school and organize like 4 or 5 little kids to come to my house and everybody would go up on stage. By the way, that's just in front of our, I don't know, 20-inch TV or something. Be like, okay, stand right there. Our house was not very big and everybody would go up there and take turns and tell stories. But then I realized as I got older, and especially living in the US and the expenses being so high, and as an international student, I had all these anxiety, to be honest. And just like became very easy to lose sight of things until I became an entrepreneur. I decided just one day I'm just going to drive with no destination, maybe go grab coffee somewhere. I started noticing all these things, like I have to say, Kevin, too, maybe to your surprise, as obvious as these fine arts are in my room, many people do not notice them at all, whether
oh,
it's via Zoom or in person in my house.
yeah.
I'm not saying majority, but there are people who come in and they don't see it. And, or maybe some are just not interested for one, but a lot
Yeah.
of people don't stop noticing even the obvious things around them.
And I'm looking at Krista's comment that just came in, but and just a note on that. I think another thing that is to bring it back to storytelling and kind of the content that a lot of the learning teams that I work with are developing. That idea of story is missing, where I think, especially in a corporate setting, there's a sense that you have to be direct. You can't waste time. You have to squeeze.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to slice off all of the extra things
Yeah,
so
so
that you
true.
can land your learning. And the impact that it has on the viewing audience or the end user for these learning products is that it just gets presented at like, here's the fact.
Hmm.
Here's how it works. This is what to do next. But what really I think makes people curious, to Charlie's point, is the fact that I'm curious if I'm learning this new skill. I have all these other questions in my head that I would like answered. What does it look like to do the skill well?
Hmm.
What happened? When was a time that it was used and it succeeded? What happens if I don't use this and it fails? How will I know when I encounter this skill out or this piece of information out in the wild? How will I know that it is that I'm seeing it for the first time? And the way that you can answer all of these questions, or a lot of them, is just by sharing a story. And so this is a big part of my discovery process when working with teams is, give me examples, tell me stories, and why what we're creating is a pain point, is interesting, or how's it relevant to your life.
Yeah, that's such a good tip and observation about what's often happened in the corporate world. And, and especially I feel for people in their 20s, if this is their first or second job, in many ways, they don't really know any better. There's nothing to compare it to. So you kind of have to, there's something that you're up against and you have to be aware of. And if that's not offered at your job, yes, you can recommend it. And I personally always work directly with L&D departments, but
Hmm.
if that is not available to you and nobody else is interested, you then have to find opportunities. I don't know what that is exactly, maybe through listening to certain podcasts, workshops, general assembly, and just find opportunities to connect and to be able to learn that set of skills because those are absolutely essential throughout your career. So Kristen here, when mentioned and also suggested, when I teach about responsible I always incorporate 3 to 4 stories of relatable AI use cases where their AI posed risks or had limitations.
I think that's a good point to bring up, Krista. Is especially in 2024, I think this idea of imaginations were running wild a year ago, but in 2024, everybody's asking the question, how do I put this to work? What do I actually do? And also, what should I not do? And so I know, especially in corporate settings, it's been, there hasn't been as much adoption because of, now people are much more aware around data and governance and kind of what their IT policy is. And so I definitely see when you tell these stories and you provide these use cases about where AI pose risks or limitations or even opportunities, it kind of gives the conversation shape, which I'm enjoying more this year than last, where rather than kind of this AI will take our jobs mentality or AI will save the world, we have a bit more shape in 2024 about what are the skills that are going to be necessary. How will this actually impact our work? There's still plenty of questions to answer, but again, by sharing these use cases or these examples or stories, it gives the conversation a bit more shape and more people can get involved.
For sure. And I love the fact that we have come to realize that we can leverage AI in parts of what we do, not towards the entirety of whatever that may be. Right? Video editing or podcast production. Like AI is not going to hop in and just do everything for you, and certainly won't do it very well, right? You're gonna there's part of you as a creator, or even if you work inside a corporate setting, like there's always part of your processes that currently cannot replace by AI, or ideally not be replaced by AI. And to figure out what that is, I think I've spoken with folks in AI. Is there a bit of an echo going on right now,
No,
Kevin?
no,
Sorry
I'm
about
just
that.
sitting up and adjusting. That's just fiddling with the mic. Sorry.
Oh yeah, see, this is absolutely live, and yeah, I feel like we have to be there and help people realize what the process is and help them explore and experiment. I also hope that people working in L&D or senior executives would allow their employees to explore more, to make mistakes, to reflect upon their experiences as opposed to guaranteed success. So I think AI has been a really hot topic for a little while now. And I hope, and I think this conversation has always been part of it. It's like, what is the risk? Like, for example, I think about maybe using a more accurate example. Uh, have you ever been in the conversation where, for example, people work in a corporate environment and they want to create let's say, a customized avatar, meaning an avatar of themselves? Number one, they don't have to, right? For people who are listening to this, there are over 150 high quality, kind of models that you can choose from right away. A lot of people actually prefer that. They don't need to be the face of their PowerPoint or their videos.
Yes.
Now, right, like but there are also probably people, especially with like people working from all over the world. They may, in some cases, want to create a character or creating an avatar from their CEO, from their head of L&D, just so that as like a like a visual ID, like people
Yes.
can resonate, relate to that character more. But
Yes.
do you find people either prefer that, or some people go, well, where is this character going to be used elsewhere, where I don't want impersonation or like certain risk or certain fear associated with that? Like, how do you deal with those conversations? What do they even come up?
Yeah, they do come up quite often. I think to take the first question first, which is, do people want to use these have avatars made? And the answer is, I think right now there's a lot of excitement. There's folks who are saying even just the tech being new, they want to see what they can do, and it can be because they are a personal brand within the company. This happens a lot with subject matter experts. This happens a lot with senior leaders,
Right.
where their presence, even if it is an AI avatar, a digital twin of themselves, it helps, for example, during onboarding, where if they are the CFO of a global company, maybe they speak a couple languages, but the company is global, and it can really affect and motivate and make somebody excited if the content is in that person's native language, but in the same tone or voice or sound of that actual person. So I know that that's a huge that's a huge use case for people who are excited to be turned into avatars. Is how can I scale myself? How can I communicate with folks across the world in 160 different languages? As far as the being afraid of access, I think this is something where Synthesia as an enterprise platform, we really stress this idea of limiting access, the idea that sharing permissions are limited, and it's I think that's at the technology level, making sure that you consent to what your likeness is used for, and you're very particular about who, if you are giving your avatar, if you're giving other people access to your avatar, it's a lot of A's in one sentence. You're going to, it's a little bit of a collaboration where, what do we say on the tech platform side? We say that, hey, there are limitations to the types of videos you can create. But if you have a custom avatar, what we ask is that you also take some responsibility about the type of content that you create and who you give access to. So I think people are looking to tech companies they don't like it when tech companies, place extreme guardrails on what types of content can be produced, which is why moving forward, it's going to be a collaboration between both the users and the tech platforms on what content that gets created, knowing that each has limitations in ensuring that this tech doesn't get used maliciously.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's funny that what you just said reminded me, Kevin. I was in Beijing recently in March and April, and I remember our family members who have not used AI avatars. Basically, they're not as much into AI. They only read certain, you know, through news outlets or articles on WeChat or wherever it may be. And then they were telling me that, Faye, did you know that they can use AI avatars to, fake your own voice and therefore hack into your bank account? I'm like, have you actually seen where we are these days? It's as much as I love the characters and then they're realistic and they're all, you can create pauses and all these things, but clearly I'm talking to people who have not really used the technology, right? Like
Yeah.
it is not that straightforward in terms of, sure, there are hackers out there are probably using not the tools that we're talking about, but whatever's outside of, all these like dark web or whatever things could be happening. But
Yes.
it's not like these things are happening every day, and you're being targeted for these things to happen. And I think, unfortunately, whenever something new is coming out, I mean, not to even get into the political landscape, right? Something new is coming out, and suddenly everybody's visually like attacking it. Something bad is going to happen, or it's going to save the world. So I hope,
Yeah.
as human beings, like especially when it comes to tech, knowing that there are huge benefits, and it's important to learn what it may mean in reference to you and your work.
Yeah.
What the world does or doesn't do actually isn't as relevant to you.
Yes. And to your point, I think a lot of folks worry about identity being stolen, but I know, at least from a Synthesia standpoint, when you go to turn yourself into a personal avatar, it's with live footage, meaning you can't just take footage from, if I were to have a YouTube channel, there are a lot of unfortunate stories of folks using similar tech where they take somebody's YouTube videos and use that to reproduce an avatar. Whereas a huge part of this, in order for all this to work, there has to be trust. And a big part of that trust is a person giving their consent to being turned into an avatar, knowing full well in that arrangement that if they ask for that information or that data to be deleted or taken away, then that is part of building trust, where you can try it out, but if you're not like it, if you're not on board with it, or something happens or you feel unsafe, you can take your likeness off. But I think, to your other point, we're just at the beginning stages of this tech, and again, the kind of the landmark moment that I keep going back to was back in I'm going to date myself, maybe 2006, 2010. When did the first iPhone come out? I should really know this. It
I
was
think
just
you're right.
before college.
2010, 2009, something like that, because I was still playing with my iPod or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
in 2009, I remember.
And
Yeah.
cameras on phones existed before that. I was definitely, when I got my first phone, my parents gave me a phone because I was driving at 16. So
Yeah.
I had to have a phone very early on. When I had the option for an upgrade, I chose the first Nokia phone that I could get my hands on that was like 90% camera so that I could film videos. So videos have been a big part of my life. But in
Wow.
2010, that's when you had a lot of, picking up from there, you had a lot of iPhone adoption. Suddenly, I should say everyone in the US, because across the world, especially in Asian countries, the camera has been on a phone for a while. So we're a little bit slow to pick it up in Pennsylvania. But that is all to say, suddenly everybody had a camera.
Yeah.
And what has happened since then is once people started getting curious or started building in the behavior, for better for worse, to whip out their phone and start recording, that's suddenly when a lot of information became available to us. And when people started posting these videos on public platforms like YouTube and Twitter, or it was Twitter back then, you suddenly had information from all over the world that, again, for better or for worse, was accessible to you. So the benefit was, now that there's video content that's just become ubiquitous, you can learn anything from just about anyone. And I think we're going to see another version of that, where if you look at, again, if video is easier to create, what can you do with it? Well, you can create your own types of video content and share different types of information. And so we'll get to see kind of maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, maybe even more, what we'll start to see is the benefits of that when suddenly everybody can make a video. And I think, of course, with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up in a video first world, maybe Gen Alpha has a slightly jaded view of technology, seeing kind of their reactions to all of this. But I think it'll just become more commonplace, and we'll get more video information out there that will feed this need for more video information that we're seeing more and more of every year.
Yeah, I'm excited to welcome that world. I mean, it's already happening, but to see this generation grow up, to see what they can create and the career opportunities they may possess. I mean, I'm just excited for them, to be honest. I'm way
Yeah.
more optimistic. And
Yes.
an area, Kevin, I want to kind of just like pivot it a little bit into, that I hear a lot, is that, okay, AI is not going to take my job, but how is someone like Kevin, yourself, and then people like you, to be able to thrive in the AI world, working for AI companies, and in your case, as an educator, as an entrepreneur, even within an AI company? Like, could you talk about a little bit of your background and how you pivoted or basically adapted what you have done, what you're doing as Synthesia? I just gonna give people a sense of how they could potentially consider AI as a career.
Interesting. Considering AI as a career, I'm in full honesty. It's a bit serendipitous. I kind of found myself here, and I think it was, but I can trace it back if I were to draw a thread to kind of where I started and kind of how I ended up here. There was, I think there's two things. One or three now that I think about it. One is I always love making videos. So whether for my job or for fun, I had a camcorder with a stop start button on it, and I would make stop motion videos since the age of, I don't know, 6 or 7, with my action figures and Legos and things like that. So video and following that thread has always been interesting to me, because with video, it's storytelling in a series of frames where you can really communicate a message, you can entertain, and you can educate. That's always been kind of at the core. And that's when I was a kindergarten teacher, it was looking at the e-learning videos that my students were watching for basic literacy and for reading comprehension. At school, the New York Times, it was how do we produce a high budget experience, and how do we craft this world-class experience with the writers at the Times. And then what I found at Synthesia was, hey, there's an AI video version of that. So that's kind of one thread that I trace through. The other is going back to education. Education and learning has always been a huge part of that drives what I do, and it has a lot to do with the learning experience. I was one of those kids that was always frustrated with the fact that I'm sitting with 24 other kids in the classroom learning from a teacher, because all the information that I could get in a 45-minute class was directly from the person in front of me. We didn't really have as many opportunities to learn from those around us, or all these books and resources that we had. And as a kindergarten teacher, I had this dream of changing this one-size-fits-all model. I had 28 little people in front of me that I had to figure out how to divide their time so that I'm really giving each student what they need, but I'm still stuck with 28 students. And I think what's different about now than before is we have access to so much information. whether that's in the classroom or on the job. Because even at school, the New York Times, when I started, we were about 10 people, and there's a lot of video skills that I just didn't have. And all the skills that I learned on the job came from YouTube, whereas just looking up how to use Premiere Pro, how to use After Effects, and just looking at what is the obstacle or the task in front of me, and then going and searching and finding a video for that. So there's this idea of, changing learning from this model of I need to get it from this one person to information is out there, let's make use of it. And then the third thing, and I know I'm just going overboard with my story, but I'm incredibly excited just having this revelation. I've been an entertainer my whole life, and it is my job to excite, entrance, motivate people, which is a huge part of learning sciences, because if you're not motivated to learn or you're not engaged continuously, you kind of tune out, and then the information goes in one ear and slips out the other. And so as a kindergarten teacher, or let me start even earlier, I've done hip hop dance. I was a cellist for 15 years, starting out as a small child. And even now, it's when I give talks or if I do workshops, I feel like it's my responsibility to engage, motivate, and entertain throughout, and that's what I'm doing for Synthesia. More emphasis on the education than on the hopefully than the engagement, or maybe two parts in whole. But I think when it comes to AI and avatars, there's a story to be told around that, and how we present and tell that story really matters, because otherwise people's imaginations can run wild. So like we said, stories shape the conversation, and that edutainment is what I'm here to provide.
I love the phrase edutainment, and I love Charlie's comment here as well. I think we all enjoy having a Kevin avatar for sure.
I've hopefully this one would, if I did one today, it would come with a mustache. So maybe that's appealing to some folks and others. So
Yeah,
Charlie, I'll think about it.
we should add your avatar to the Synthesia platform. It's highly recognizable, and it's so funny that when you mentioned you're a kindergarten teacher, that's I know someone at Samstrom is learning early childhood education, and now he's working at. I have such admiration for people who interact and educate little kids, because I imagine them just easily bored and so high energy. So you really
Yes.
have to be on your toes.
Yes, on your toes. It was from about 7:10 every day to 4:30. It was a long day.
How did you recover from that? I'm curious, because I know people just like go home and like pass out from
I'll
teaching
be
kids.
honest. When you're in it, you're in it. But I think what's nice about the academic year is that they're compared to jobs, corporate jobs, there is a starting point and an end point at which you can kind of take a step back and reflect and check in. And after 4 years of being a classroom teacher, I was burnt out. And so when you talk about cooling off after class, it was that 15, 20-minute walk home from the Franklin Avenue C train to my apartment, where it's just like, I need this walk. I need this walk, and I don't need to listen to anything, talk to anybody, or do anything. I just need to zone out, because it really takes the full extent of your intellect, your ability to entertain and engage.
Yep, but you certainly learned something. Now, I realize there's perhaps a tipping point. I wonder how Synthesia found you. So I have some clues in my head, because you probably posted content on YouTube. You talked about being the hip hop dancer. I didn't know any of this, and celloist. So I wonder, like, for people to get to know, you clearly had a personal brand, right? I don't know how much of that was public, but how were you discovered? And tell us about the establishment of your personal brand.
Establishment of my personal brand. So, for context, I've been in Copenhagen for 3 years, and very soon after I got here, it was during the pandemic. My wife got a job here, and I could work remote. This is when I was working for General Assembly. I could work remote, and so I was like, "Let's go." And so we got to Copenhagen, I think on June 11th of 2021, or that's when I got there, and because I wasn't I was coming from the U.S. I didn't have a Danish Social Security yet, and so I couldn't get an apartment, and so we were looking for temporary housing. And I should also mention that at this point I was over the age of 30, and when you're over the age of 30 and you have roommates after living with your partner, for a few years, you're like, am I taking a step back? But what I will say is that one of the people who walked in through the door 2 days after I did was my roommate Dan, who also works at Synthesia. And at that time, I was working from both European hours all the way to West Coast hours, and I was just saying like, hey, I'm just looking for something in Copenhagen. And at this time, I didn't know about Synthesia. I didn't know Victor and Stefan. And he was just like, hey, you have a learning and development background. You should meet these folks. And so long story short, I met Vic and Steph, and they were fantastic. And they still are. I think that's worth mentioning. And Synthesia has kind of taken off. But at the time, it was about 40 people or so. So it was very small. But I met them. I saw the first stages of the product. And I was like, this is fantastic. I could have used this at one of my last assignments at Sotheby's Institute of Art. I was creating a course on how to buy and sell things at auction, and I needed to translate that course into Spanish, and it cost $15,000. But when I was looking at AI videos, with a click of a button, I can translate this to 90% good enough with just a click of a button. And so that really stood out to me. In terms of building a personal brand, I think what was needed at the time when I started at Synthesia was not just learning and development expertise, but really showcasing how to use this in work. So I spent a lot of, I really feel a connection to you, Faye, because I know the work that you started out with was teaching folks how to use video and teaching folks what to do with it and how to make use of it and how to make business sense of it. What are the things that they should consider? And so I was doing a lot of that and helping folks figure out solutions that use video with these AI avatars, because it was still pre-ChatGPT, pre-generative AI. People needed to know what to do with it. It was very, the avatars were enticing. It was interesting, but to actually use this in an enterprise setting was missing. And so I spent a lot of time with learning folks and learning that, hey, I should just share out what's working for these people and with myself. And I use that to build the foundations of Synthesia Academy, which really just started out as, hey, we can't have one person one time a week telling people how to use the platform. And so I kind of took that over, generated a lot of YouTube content, and reposted that stuff on LinkedIn. And I think it just kind of also timed in well with the generative AI video wave. And so, that's how I built my personal brand, not really with intention, but more so, hey, I could get more of more people can see how to use this tool well if I were to post this on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And that's how it took off.
I love what you said in the end, because when you create a personal brand, it's not just for the sake of doing it. It's not for fame or just followers, but you're putting content out there trying to help other people. I think as a result, right, you accidentally build your personal brand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point, I was thinking about this coming into this conversation because I know you built a personal brand. I was thinking about for those folks who are getting started, I was thinking, what is like the one thing that I want folks to take away if they are looking to build a personal brand, whether that's within their company or on social or whatever context or whatever their reality is at the moment. I was thinking, I'm curious to hear this from you as well, but I think the thing that I landed on is having a very strong point of view. Whether that's popular or unpopular, it's finding folks being able to look at your at the content you're putting out there, regardless of your intent, and having them understand your personal point of view. And just to share mine, because I won't just throw you out there and ask you what is your point of view, but mine is, what can I use my digital twin for? Because as more people are getting personal avatars, and just to shout out that Synthesia is having an event on July 31st that you can find where folks who are attending get their personal avatars. I often think about, what can I use my digital twin for? What do I need my human self for? And that's my strong point of view. And I'm curious to know kind of what is yours, and maybe what advice you have as well.
Yeah, I have a point of view on AI. I think everybody should explore and to learn and to adapt to their own needs or their organization's needs. But I think the bigger picture for me, being a creative entrepreneur, is to know that it's possible. And coming from a background as a woman of color, coming from, luckily my family isn't actually that traditional, meaning my parents who have more direct influence, to me. Mom is an artist, as you know. My dad was also an artist,
Wow.
before he passed away. But everybody else in the family had traditional jobs, or nurses and doctors, and they're musicians who work full time for the orchestra. So I think breaking that barrier, or know that there are other possibilities, not just for me, but if I can do it, so can you. And with AI, it's making it even more possible and easier. So that's
Exactly.
really my belief. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, earlier just today, I was looking on LinkedIn, a lot of people who are younger than I was, like working in these agencies. Now they're SVP, senior vice presidents at these companies. I mean, on one hand, I was like, good for them. I can see that their parents were proud, they were proud, and they're probably, easier paychecks, but you are essentially, right, exchanging your time for money. And where are you going next? Are you happy on your career track? Maybe you are. But Kevin, I want to respect your time. And what I like to do sometimes towards the end is, like, there's so all these questions. I want to do some rapid fire questions. Doesn't
Let's
have to be
do
so
it.
rapid, but I just have these questions. I feel like I have to hit them. Number one, you'll have over 12,000 followers on LinkedIn. You were talking about LinkedIn a moment ago. I mean, you have a personal brand on LinkedIn in addition to YouTube podcasts and all that.
Yes.
Did you have a formula? Did you have a way, or like something that you have figured out to build a following and have people engaging with you on LinkedIn and even here in our live stream?
Yeah. There's so many things to pull out. I think the one of the main things that really helped me is to understand the purpose of the platform. And maybe what I didn't understand before about LinkedIn was, I think it's how I was using it. If you look at my timeline and you go back to before Synthesia, I only use LinkedIn if I was searching for a job. And I think we forget that it's a social channel. It's meant to connect with people, and it's meant for people to share their thoughts and have other people's thoughts shared with them. And so a big part, if I had to break it down to like a technique, or a big thing for me was to respond to five people's posts every day, and just build that habit of being present in the platform, because it is a social media platform, meaning it really, you have to interact and connect and meet with people. And I think what that did, commenting on other people's posts or their content, and then also finding people that I actually could realistically vibe with and have a conversation with. So one of my favorite connections that I ever made very early on, and he was one of my first guests on Video Learning Lab, the podcast that I produced with Synthesia, was a Jay Jacob, where we just connected. He was at doing learning and development at the time. I think I won't say the name of his company, but yeah, we just got to talking. We had this idea that we connected on, where it was learning and development needs to adopt more of a product mindset, where, again, we're just not producing a course, but instead we're engaging the end user throughout the entire spectrum of their learning journey. And that eventually became my first IRL meetup. And I realized, like, there's where I went to Amsterdam, and we met at the train station. I met his family. It was a great connection, and I still keep in touch with him today. But it's this idea of using LinkedIn as a social platform rather than just a place to get jobs. And I did that by, again, looking for content that resonated with me and people, and responding to at least 5 comments a day, and building that behavior of just being on the platform.
I love it. These are, I would say, engaging with other people's content, which many people do not do.
Yes.
Not just like and upvote, but actually leaving a comment, asking a question, and responding to other people's answers and
Yes.
questions, right? So, all right. So, a
Sorry, and
couple
I
of
realize these are rapid fire questions, which probably means you need rapid fire answers. So I'll be better. So please,
and no,
next
no,
one.
I like the context. I think that's important. Now, next question, Kevin. I know that you started a podcast, and there's a learning podcast. It's branded by Synthesia as well. So I don't know if that's your only podcast, but could you give us, like, maybe your top 2, 3 lessons being a podcaster? Growing your show, or learning what some of the key learnings as a host, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, the first is, I think, not just doing the prep. I think it's important to do your homework before a guest comes on, but making sure that you've prepared the guest to be clued into stories and examples, because I think the internet is rife with so many recorded conversations that are on, but what makes it a podcast to me is examples and stories, and you come away learning something about the particular guest, like even if it's just one story that helps you know who they are as a person, and then having an actionable takeaway. I think as I'm talking with guests, I'm always thinking about, okay, based off of how we connected, based off of what they've shared, what is the one thing that folks can walk away with, and making sure that gets out, whether by directly questioning them at the end or by kind of taking the threads of the conversation and trying to pull it into one message. Because otherwise it's nice to listen to two people talk like we're doing now, but it's even better to come away with something insightful or something synthesized from that conversation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would agree. Like I sometimes would encourage the guest himself herself to suggest something. Like, what is the one takeaway? Now, I'm not going to quiz you, Kevin, on our conversation because I know it's
Sure.
been a couple of months. But what are some of the recent recordings, recent conversation you remember, you recall what that key lesson was or key takeaway was?
Yeah, so one of the first, my very first guest, a great guy by the name of Mohsen Maman. He was a game designer, and the conversation was a lot about what L&D folk can learn from game designers. And in game design, there's this very foundational concept called the magic circle, where what makes a game, it's when you step into the circle of the game, there are rules about how to interact within the game. How do you get points? How do you win? And the rules that only exist within the experience. And why that was so impactful for me was because it's the same in learning, where you don't just take a person, drop them into your learning experience and just fire off information at them and tell them to fill this out or do this. There should be rules for how they can interact, whether that's an asynchronous course or maybe some sort of blended experience. There should be a story to tell. There should be things that exist within the time that they're within your learning experience, that when they step out, they're able to say like, oh, there's something different about now, or there's something that I learned within this structured or controlled space that I can bring into my life now that I'm not within that learning circle. So it was that idea of taking the magic circle from games, where if we're playing tag, it's for these next 2 minutes when we play tag, if I tag you, you're it. That means you chase me. It's very clearly stating the rules up front, and I think it should be the same for a lot of the learning experiences that we say, where how do you operate in this learning world that you're about to enter.
Cool. Wow. Look at that. And Kevin, do you have another 10 or so minutes?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. I got to ask this question, which we didn't, but now as part of the rapid fire section. And guys, if you are here, still ask questions. Drop them in the comments below, please. Kevin, can you share what the FOCA framework, FOCA framework is, and how that can sometimes significantly improve the quality of the learning video? And please explain what FOCA is, because I think some
sure.
folks may not be aware.
Yeah, so FOCA is spelled FOCA, and before any of the folks in the audience go to Google what FOCA means, it's baby seal in Portuguese, so spoiler alert. But the letters FOCA, what it started out as, it's a framework for creating consistently impactful video. So F stands for foundation, O for organization, C for content, and A for action. And so in a nutshell, what this is if you take you were talking about storytelling, and I know we were talking about frameworks and maybe repeatable processes before. This is how you go through it, where foundation is really about do you understand your audience, and do you know what you want your video to do? And so starting with the end in mind, who are you designing this for? What do you want them to do? O is for organization, which is about focusing a single video on a single topic and making sure that you have the examples, the stories, the data to help prove that point or that idea for a single video. There's C, which is about visual design and making sure that you're using basic rules like the rule of thirds, or that your script is conversational. These are really, I think, basic things that folks sometimes forget, but when you see them laid out in a checklist form or on a rubric, you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. And then A is action, which I think is extremely important for instructional and informational content, which is, if you're looking at marketing, it's A is kind of like call to action, where there should be a next step. And I think in terms of instruction, how I frame it is that action is about guiding your end user to think about what should they do with this information that you've just given them. Because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And so how the FOCA framework started, though, was interesting because Synthesia Academy, I think, was running for a good 8 to 10 months. We had some really basic tutorials on there, but I was running into this problem of, our product is pretty easy to use, but we're not getting really consistently impactful video. And I think I went through a process I'm sure you've done 1,000 times, where you go through hundreds and hundreds of videos from all over, and you really break them into their component pieces, and you say, okay, what captured my attention? What does the thumbnail look like? How is this video designed? And really broke it down into these elements that we then use to teach as a curricular framework for how to create good videos, in particular with AI and avatars.
So cool. I mean, for folks who are just hopping on now or watch this later, I included links to the definition of FOCA, and there's a link to synthesia.io. Now, Kevin, another fire question is that as a creator, podcaster, video creator, could you talk to us a bit about your gear setup? Clearly, we see a boom arm, a microphone.
Yeah.
In your videos, like shifting, moving a bit while we're live
Okay.
streaming.
Yes. Yes. So I apologize if that's distracting. So my
No,
setup right
not at all.
now, let's see, tech setup. I've got two main ones. I've got one for the office and one for home. At home is a bit more casual. So right now I have a nice little boom here, so I can move things around and fiddle with it when you're asking me questions and I'm thinking
Yeah,
I need
same
something
here.
in
Look
my
at
hands.
that. So cool.
But this is a Rode NTB mic. It's a USB microphone. I chose it because at the time I couldn't afford, what is that one that everybody had?
Yeti?
Not the
Like,
Yeti, but
yeah.
there's one that all podcasters
Oh,
use.
ooh, I know. This is
The
like a
Shure, it's SHUR,
sure.
the Shure
Yeah,
mic. Anyway, so I couldn't afford that, so I got this.
yeah.
And right now you're actually looking at an iPhone that is paired, and right now I have the reason that it's moving around. I'm going to zoom out for a second because it has center stage, which is video tracking. So if
Whoa.
I move over here, or it should work. There it goes. It
Yeah,
barely
you have
moves
to
and
like
zooms.
pause. What app are you using for it to be trackable?
So I use this is all the Apple iOS. So with the iPhone, you can, if you have an iPhone, I think, and it is the iPhone 10 and beyond, you can sync right to your app or right into your video conferencing tool. So we're using Restream now, but it just shows up as an option if you connect it with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and it works extremely well. And then I also have a Logitech light here that I'll just turn on and off so folks can see. It's the
Yeah,
Logitech little cube light that's up there. And then
yeah.
in the office, I have a 4K camera for if I want to do high production content, or if I'm shooting an avatar, and that's a ZV-E10, which I think is marketed as the most commonly used blogger camera.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is like a Z. I think this is the V1, maybe. Yeah, ZVE1. I just got this
Okay.
like literally a couple of weeks ago.
And it works great for vlogging and
Yeah.
blogging, and really crisp picture that comes out of there. I think
Mm,
what was important for me was that I needed something, a big piece of that. And I always tell folks who are getting into streaming,
mhm.
get a 4K camera, but then you need
A
something to boost
camel
the
link.
exactly the
Yeah,
4K, the Elgato
yeah.
4K cam link. It's expensive, but it just boosts the quality
It's called
of
camel
your
link.
output.
I
Yeah.
keep thinking about it's camel because camel is the.
You know what? It's camel. If you read it quickly, it's camel ink. Like if you just look at it
Yeah.
quickly. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I love Elgato products. I'm very, very lucky to have so many different products in front of me, like the key lights, and there's their nano line of things as well. It's just like all these like a baby versions of
Yeah,
lights, and
yeah,
yeah, those are Nero. I think it's called Nero line.
yeah.
Yeah, this is super cool. And then most people have heard about my products, and I've written about more about them lately on CNET. You can find my voices there.
I saw
But
that. That was impressive. That came out since we last spoke. So congratulations.
oh,
That's cool stuff.
Thank you. Isn't it crazy? Time flies since June.
Time flies. Since June. That's
Since
only
June
July.
1st,
Okay.
I published the first, since June 4th, I published the first article. Then is like early July. The August one's coming out very, very soon, could already be out. And there's like a summer special article that I wrote
Incredible.
talking about my new desk setup from Flexi Spot as well.
You're living my dream. In another life, I got to play with new tech tools, and you're just living it. So enjoy. That sounds amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wow. We can derail this pretty quickly, but I have a couple of more questions.
Sure.
And I think we have to both respond to the fact that, you're born and raised in the US, Pennsylvania
Hmm.
specifically, and you
Hmm.
have been living in Copenhagen for 3 years now. Could you talk
Yes.
about, yeah, if folks are going there for the first or second time, what are some of the things that they're the touristy things, but they're also
Sure.
things that you find really interesting, fascinating, you recommend?
Yeah. So the first thing that hit me, and it still hits me 3 years later, is I basically live in blonde Jurassic Park. Everybody here is 6 feet tall and blonde. Like the babies are blonde, the grandparents are blonde, everybody's blonde. It's very new for me, especially moving from the U.S. So that you'll that come to expect that. It's it has a nice huge canal that runs through this along the edge of it, and so no matter where you are, you're very close to the water.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, if you like Christmas vibes, then come in November because Christmas here, yeah, the Christmas markets it lasts for I want to say like 40 days or maybe a month. So that it's really cute and they do it well here. Otherwise, don't come at all because the weather is terrible. And so if you come in June, July, or August, like right now,
Yeah.
it never gets above 75 degrees and you can go swimming in the canal. So pack your swimsuit. I promise it's not that cold. And it's just an absolute vibe. What I will say is, so I moved here from New York and from the US. That's where I was living before I moved to Copenhagen. And in New York, we do have seasons, but it's either just like boiling hot or it's just bitter cold and snow. And a lot of that has to do with the architecture of New York. Versus here, I've really gone through the 4 seasons and I've come to appreciate seasons. So if you like seasons, if you like Christmas, if you like swimming, and just a good vibe, Copenhagen is your place. I promise. It's expensive. Like, food is so expensive here,
Oh, wow. Well, how,
but
how
you
does it
will be
compare to New
cozy and
York?
comfortable.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more expensive than New York. I'm not gonna lie.
W- f-
So
okay, pause on that for a
sure,
second.
sure,
New
sure,
York is
sure,
one of the
sure.
most important, one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Yeah.
What about food, rent, and just like
Sure, yeah,
a
yeah, let's get
necessity?
into it. So I would say the cost of living, rents are, you get more bang for your buck here than I was living in a box in New York, and now
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm living extravagantly wealthy, but there's light coming through these windows, which is an improvement. But I
There's
will say
windows
food,
here.
food
Yeah.
is expensive, and going out, there's no mid-range restaurants and cafes really in Copenhagen. It's either you're getting kebabs that are kind of like the low tier. When I say low tier, I mean less expensive, or it's you're spending $50-$60 for a dinner for a decent dinner for two people out.
50,
So
60 US dollars.
U.S. dollars, yes.
It is, I think maybe you haven't been back for a little while, Kevin.
Oh,
The
inflation is high.
food,
Okay,
oh
cool.
my
Oh,
God.
great. Maybe the
In
whole
New
world is just
York,
like that. Yeah.
in Boston, we traveled recently to somewhere in Vermont. We
Yeah.
ordered like two personalized size pizza. It was $60, gave about 20% tip. It was like 72, $75. A pizza shop. We're not talking about extravagant like a restaurant or anything. It's just a place to stop by. Um,
That is insane.
yeah.
So what I will say to justify some of these prices is people are paid decent wages here,
Yeah.
and you don't have to tip. This is my big thing. If you come to Copenhagen, like the wages are fair. You do, and you're not expected to tip. They'll still do the credit card machine and look away, but you're not obligated to, as
Oh,
opposed
wow.
to in the U.S.
You
The
have to.
cost of food gets passed off,
Yeah.
gets passed off to the customer to via the tip to supply fair wages. So just a little note about that over here.
Wow. Like what do you do for fun? Like nights and weekends, food or
Yeah. Um,
festivals?
so The summer's the time to be outside. So as soon as I'm done here, look, this is the tannest I've ever been, which is kind of wild to say because I spent more time outside than I ever have in my entire life.
Mm.
Because we have, we're on the latitude where the sun comes up at 4:30 a.m.
Oh,
and
wow.
doesn't go down until about 11, and then even then it just dips and comes back up. Which means that during the winter, it like the sun is behind clouds but comes up around like 11 and goes down at like 3. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, during the summer it's all about swimming,
Uh,
being on boats out here. Not like I own a boat, but it's very easy to rent a boat out here,
yeah.
and a lot of eating. You kind of save up for the summer is really what it amounts to. And
Yeah.
then for fun, so I do improv comedy, which like I said, I'm an educator, but also
Mm.
an entertainer, and that's how I get that fix when work gets too serious, doing
Mm.
improv comedy. But otherwise, you could be out until the wee hours of the morning, and life is just very comfortable, easy, and safe here.
Obviously you do improv comedy in English. How do people there respond to your comedy, to do jokes and
Yeah, so what's great is everybody in Copenhagen, at least, they speak English better than I do. Like, if you hesitate, it's what's been easy to move here as an expat. So when I tell my jokes, they at least interpret and understand them. But also, I find that Danish people are very reserved. So
Mm.
it's very, I think they find it exciting or enthralling to see this very tan person acting, telling stories and acting very interestingly on stage. So definitely, I enjoy when it gets quiet and a little bit awkward, and that's when the comedy really starts to flow out. So far, I've gotten good compliments, good feedback. People are receptive, but yeah, it was new when I got here. I didn't do that before I got here. I wanted to try something new, and I know that's what kind of your brand is. There's other opportunities. There's something new, and that was my new venture. Can we get out in front of people and entertain?
Wow. I feel like that just needs to be like a follow-up episode. Like
Yeah,
imagine
for sure.
an
Absolutely.
expat, right? You didn't do this here, but you're doing it in a foreign country to do improv
Exactly, where
comedy.
nobody knows me and
I,
nobody can get to me. Yeah,
yeah, that's true.
it's very easy to perform. There's safety in anonymity, but
Mhm.
I'm finding out that Copenhagen is actually very small, and so I think some of those people are starting to come back around.
Yeah, this is so cool. Oh my God, Kevin. I feel like I could literally just keep going. But to answer
Yeah,
your questions from before we hit recording, for those of you who don't know where I am, where I have been living the past 3 to 4 years, I'm currently in a beautiful town, Grafton, very naturey, with a lot of sort of the golf courses, a lot of the farms, and you don't really see a lot of big standard American shops and grocery stores like Wegmans and Trader Joe's right away. Here, some stop and shops. I mean, it's so funny how
oh,
the
Stop
grocery
and
stores
Shop,
all
yes.
they'll differ from like region to region in the US. But prior to this, I spent about 15, almost 20 years living in Newton slash Boston area, which is 45 minutes east of where I am. So I'm currently in like a central Massachusetts. And Kevin, you asked me like what 15-year-olds do, like how do kids grow up here? I would say
Yeah.
it's so interesting to watch them play out on the street in the cul-de-sac, right? Like
Oh, it's
to
like neighborhood suburban vibes. Yeah.
yeah,
That's like
exactly, as
how I
opposed to
grew
be
up.
on their
Yeah.
phones, and then kids come out, and then you get a we once had a 13-year-old girl who organized these, like, play dates for all these six-year-olds, and now she's moved away, and now the six-year-olds are all standing around, they're 8 now, but they're like, "Okay, what do we do?" And then the parents have to get a little involved, but I just love seeing the old ways of being and playing,
Yeah.
with as kids,
Yeah.
so I also find Worcester, which is the bigger city, which is only 15 minutes away from me. Worcester is pretty well known. It was kind of the more blue collar up and coming. And in the past 20 years, it really has changed. There's the Hanover Theater, there's the DCU big sports centers where the Cirque du Soleil and other big productions are coming to like showcase their work here. There are a lot of festivals, there are a lot of food festivals, cultural events, art galleries, art exhibits, and museums. And so if you really look for it, and if you talk to local people who are, kind of like Kevin, who likes to explore, and you really find a lot going on. So I think I encourage people, we're talking about AI and tech, just get out, get outside and really
Yes.
understand, what's around you. And I encourage people to travel internationally as well and to live there if they can. But there's so much around us. Get out there and connect with people and learn from each other.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was supposed to add on to that or not.
Oh, yeah,
I feel
please, please. I'm
compelled
not trying to
to.
wrap up.
No,
To
no, I feel
continue.
compelled to. Where
Yeah.
it's I, I think this idea of I'm always fascinated by this idea of being bored,
Mm,
where I'm not bulletproof. I sometimes find myself on Instagram where I'm an hour goes by. I'm like, what just happened? But I
mm,
also go through periods of I think intense creativity where I can make things. I'm more excited to try things out.
mm,
And I find ways to entertain myself and also cultivate all the things that all of my interest. But there's always this transition period where I'm dissatisfied by what I'm consuming, or I've done
mm.
it for just too long and my eyeballs are square. And then there's this period of boredom where I start looking around for things that interest me. And then if you push through that, you get into I think the creative space or the engaging space or the interesting space where you start to notice things around you and try new things out. So that's my addition on what you said is get bored. Get
Yeah.
bored because while there's a lot of content out there, I'd venture to say that at this point, people can get pretty dissatisfied with what's on the feed after scrolling for a few hours.
Yeah, it's true. We're gonna get out there. I have to tell you, Kevin, yesterday I came across the phenomenon that I was not aware before. There was a young woman, Gen Z, and who
Okay.
wrote this song called "I'm Looking for a Guy in Finance."
Yes.
I
Great
only knew
song.
about this. I at the beginning I thought she was kidding. It's one of those,
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
just trolling and
Yeah.
whatever. And then the next thing I knew, it was like New York Times, and she signed a exclusive license. I don't even know how many millions we're talking about here, and then it just then I realized that we never know what people might be into. Like you, if you're watching this, you don't know what people will decide, what they might choose. So don't keep questioning yourself. Whatever whatever that creative energy may be, just
Yes.
put it out there. Most people are not going to look at it anyway, and they won't judge. And you never know what's going to take off. I bet that young woman had no idea she's going to be famous for that. And in 4 months, all may all be gone. What's your take
Yes.
on that, Kevin? I can't believe you're aware of it.
Yeah, sure. So I was aware when that meme came out. I was soon also aware of one thing that I have a deep passion is the wrong word. Obsession is the other one. Is finding DJs who then remix memes and like turn them into techno songs or EDM
Yeah.
songs. And it's and I'm sure as I'm saying that, I'm like somebody who's watching, they're just like, he doesn't know the difference between techno and EDM, and they're right. But there are plenty of DJs out there, really creative folks who can take just about anything and turn it into a pretty impressive song. And so that's how I actually found it first, was a side by side where
Mhm.
this I'm sure this DJ wasn't meaning to go viral, but he went probably not as viral as the original person who recorded that video, but also took a chance, created something, saw an opportunity, and put something out into the world, and he also blew up. So again, you never know, but
Yeah.
I think given how many people are creating things, if you create one new thing and put it out into the world, there's a
Yeah.
pretty good chance that it won't get found. And I
Mhm.
think that's a bonus, because then you can
Mhm.
try again and you can create another thing until you
Mhm.
create something great. But does start with creating that first thing, and more importantly, showing it to people. Maybe it's not putting it
Mhm.
on the internet, but it's showing it to other people so that
Mhm.
you can see, what clicks.
Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe you help a few people along the way, and you're not always going to find out because people don't always tell you once they've engaged and what they've done with the work. But I think it's our responsibility to express ourselves in a positive way, to help other
Yes.
people,
Yes.
to make this world a better place. So with that said, Kevin, it's been such a pleasant and comforting conversation with you, and I hope we'll get to create some video snippets and put it out there in the world so people
Sure.
can engage with
Yeah.
different parts of the conversation. We both believe in content repurposing, luckily.
Yeah.
And yeah, with that said, I'm going to take us offline, encourage people to please connect with Kevin on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn information is right below wherever you're looking at this in the description. And please do check out Synthesia as well. And also Synthesia Academy. So, yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Kevin.
And Faith, thank you so much for having me on. This is our second conversation, but again, it was even more delightful than the first. So thanks again for hosting me.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Kevin. We'll definitely be in touch.